Some California wineries are being accused of knowingly selling wines with high levels of arsenic. The chemical found in nature and man-made pesticides can be toxic.
In the last few years, wine producers have been under pressure for one reason. Most popular wine is no longer made the traditional way. In this video, I'm breaking down 9 wine brands you should avoid, because many bottles sold in the US are adjusted, engineered, and mass-produced to hit a flavor target, not quality. Sugar is added to fix bad grapes. Flavors are corrected to stay consistent, and shortcuts are used to scale fast. What looks like a premium wine is often closer to a factory product. If you want honest breakdowns of everyday foods and drinks without marketing noise, subscribe to this channel. After exposing the worst offenders, I'll also show 4 wine brands that are safer, with the final one being the cleanest option available. Let's start with brand number 9. Brand number 9, Franzia. Franzia is trusted because it feels practical. It's cheap, sold in large boxes, and marketed as wine that lasts for weeks without going bad. For many people, that sounds like a smart deal: more wine, less waste, less thinking. But that long life is the biggest red flag. Wine is supposed to be fresh, alive, and sensitive to oxygen. Franzia is designed to do the opposite. To survive months in a box, often after being opened, the wine is built around stability, not quality. The grapes are selected for yield, not flavor. Fermentation is pushed for speed, not character. And the final product is adjusted so it stays flat, predictable, and unchanged for as long as possible. This means freshness is sacrificed early. Complexity is removed. Any natural variation that real wine has is treated as a problem and engineered out. What you're drinking isn't wine that develops. It's wine that's locked in place. That's why Franzia feels dull, sweet, and one-dimensional. It's not meant to age, breathe, or evolve. It's meant to sit. This turns wine into a storage product, closer to a shelf-stable beverage than a fermented food. And once you understand that, something becomes clear. Even bottles that look premium can be made the exact same way. And that brings us to the next brand, because you don't need a box for wine to be this heavily controlled. Brand number 8, Yellowtail. Yellowtail is trusted because it feels easy and friendly. The label is colorful, the name is familiar, and the wine is marketed as something anyone can enjoy. No wine knowledge required. That casual appeal is exactly why it sells so well. The real issue is how predictable the wine is. Yellowtail is engineered to taste the same every single year, regardless of weather, grape quality, or harvest conditions. Real wine naturally changes from vintage to vintage. With Yellowtail, those changes are treated as a problem that must be corrected. To achieve this uniform taste, the focus shifts away from the grapes themselves and toward flavor control. Wines are adjusted, blended, and corrected until they match a preset profile. The goal isn't to express where the wine came from. It's to hit the same flavor target every time. That level of uniformity doesn't happen by accident. It signals heavy manipulation behind the scenes. Any rough edges, natural variation, or imperfections are smoothed out until the wine becomes safe, simple, and forgettable. What you end up with is a product designed for consistency, not authenticity. It's reliable, but it's not real wine in the traditional sense. And the next brand takes this idea even further, because instead of hiding manipulation behind friendliness, it hides it behind a family story. Brand number 7, Barefoot Wine. Barefoot is trusted because it's everywhere. Grocery stores, parties, events, you don't have to look for it. That kind of availability creates a sense of safety. If millions of people drink it, it must be fine. The problem is scale. Barefoot is produced on an industrial level, where wine is treated less like a fermented product and more like a manufactured beverage. When production reaches that size, grapes are no longer chosen for quality or character. They're chosen for volume, speed, and cost control. At that scale, natural variation becomes a liability. Grapes don't always taste the same, so the wine is adjusted after fermentation to stabilize flavor. One of the most common tools used is sugar correction, added not to improve wine, but to cover sharp edges, weak grapes, and uneven batches. The goal is smoothness, not honesty. This approach flattens everything. The wine loses identity, structure, and any sense of where it came from. What you're drinking is the result of correction, not craftsmanship. That's the trade-off of volume-driven wine. Consistency replaces grape quality, and speed replaces care. And the next brand proves something important. You don't need massive scale to lose authenticity. Sometimes it disappears behind a carefully crafted image. Brand number 6. Sutter Home. Sutter Home is trusted because it wears a family-owned image. The branding suggests tradition, care, and a hands-on approach, which makes people believe the wine is more honest than it really is. The issue shows up in the glass. Much of Sutter Home's wine relies on residual sugar to smooth out flaws created earlier in production. Instead of letting grapes ripen properly or allowing fermentation to develop balance, sweetness is used as a shortcut to make the wine feel softer and more drinkable. That shortcut starts with high-yield grape sourcing. When vineyards are pushed to produce more fruit, quality drops. Grapes lose concentration and character, and sugar becomes the easiest way to cover that up later. The wine tastes pleasant, but it lacks structure, depth, and identity. This is where sweetness replaces craftsmanship. Before we move on, subscribe if you want clear, no marketing breakdowns of popular foods and drinks. This channel exists to explain what labels don't. Like this video if these details are helping you see wine differently, and comment if this brand surprised you. The next one shows how premium branding can be just as misleading. Brand number 5. Josh Cellars. Josh Cellars is trusted because of its emotional story. The brand is built around a personal tribute, and that story creates an instant connection. It feels genuine, grounded, and human, qualities people naturally associate with careful winemaking. The problem is what happened after that story went mainstream. Josh Cellars didn't grow slowly. It scaled rapidly, moving into national distribution at a speed that most traditional wine producers never experience. When a brand grows that fast, wine stops being the center of attention. Logistics, supply contracts, and output targets take over. To keep shelves stocked, production has to be standardized. Grapes are sourced broadly instead of selectively. Winemaking decisions are made to maintain a familiar profile, not to reflect the vineyard or the harvest. The process becomes about protecting the brand image, not protecting the wine itself. Over time, the label stays emotional, but the product becomes generic. The wine doesn't tell a story anymore, it just supports one. What started as a personal idea turns into a marketing wrapper around mass production. That's why Josh Cellars belongs on this list. It's a clear example of how image can grow faster than quality. And once that happens, the wine becomes secondary. And next, we'll look at a brand that doesn't rely on story at all, but instead uses bold flavor and intensity to distract from what's missing underneath. Brand number 4. Apothic Wines. Apothic Wines built its reputation on being bold and smooth. That promise attracts people who want a strong, rich-tasting wine without needing to understand wine at all. If it feels intense and goes down easily, it must be good. At least that's the assumption. The issue is how that intensity is created. Apothic relies heavily on blending to control mouthfeel and impact. Instead of letting one vineyard or one harvest speak for itself, multiple wines are combined and adjusted until they hit a specific texture target. The goal isn't balance or expression, it's thickness, smoothness, and immediate impact. To achieve that feel, natural variation is pushed aside. Rough edges are softened, lighter notes are buried, and subtlety is removed. What remains is a wine designed to feel heavy and dramatic, even if the grapes themselves don't support that naturally. This is why Apothic wines often taste dark, dense, and similar across bottles. The sensation is engineered. The grapes aren't leading, the process is. That's why the intensity feels forced instead of earned. It's manufactured, not grown. And next, we'll look at a brand that doesn't rely on boldness or texture at all, but instead uses sweetness and trend appeal to pull people in, especially new wine drinkers. Brand number 3. Stella Rosa. Stella Rosa is hugely popular because it feels easy and approachable, especially for casual wine drinkers. It's sweet, smooth, and doesn't taste like what most people think wine is supposed to taste like. That's exactly why it sells. The problem is that Stella Rosa is built around sweetness first, not fermentation. Real wine develops flavor through time, yeast activity, and balance. Here, fermentation is kept very limited, and sweetness is used to carry the entire experience. That means the wine never develops depth, structure, or complexity. What you end up drinking behaves more like a flavored beverage than a traditional wine. The grape character is faint. The fermentation process plays a small role. Most of the experience comes from sweetness masking what's missing underneath. This approach makes the wine easy to drink, but it also removes everything that makes wine wine. There's no evolution, no character, and nothing that reflects how or where the grapes were grown. Before we move on, subscribe if you want content that explains what popular drinks really are, not what marketing says they are. Like this video if you've ever wondered why some wines don't feel like wine at all. And answer this in the comments. Be honest. Do you drink Stella Rosa because you enjoy wine, or because it doesn't taste like wine? Don't skip that question. Up next, we're getting even closer to the line between dessert and wine. Brand number 2, Cupcake Vineyards. Cupcake Vineyards earns trust before the bottle is even opened. The dessert-style name and branding signal comfort, sweetness, and ease. It tells people exactly what to expect, and that expectation does most of the selling. The deeper issue is that the wine is built to meet a flavor promise, not to reflect grapes, place, or time. Instead of allowing natural aging to shape balance, the profile is engineered to land in a narrow, crowd-pleasing zone. Sweetness levels, acidity, and fruit notes are adjusted, so the wine feels smooth and familiar from the first sip. This removes the role of fermentation as a creative process. Fermentation becomes a step to manage, not something that develops character. There's no patience involved, no waiting for the wine to settle or evolve. Everything is pushed toward immediate gratification. As a result, the wine tastes complete right away, but also flat. There's no progression in the glass, no change as it opens up, and no sense of depth. What you're tasting is a finished product assembled to match a concept. That's why Cupcake sits near the top of this list. The flavor isn't grown over time. It's designed to fit the label. And next, we're looking at the brand that takes this entire approach to its extreme. Brand number 1, Ménage à Trois. Ménage à Trois sits at number 1 because it represents everything that's gone wrong with mass-market wine. It has a cult-like following, especially among people who want bold flavor without thinking too much about what's in the bottle. The name is memorable, the blends are dramatic, and the wine is designed to leave an impression fast. The problem is how much intervention happens from grape to bottle. This wine isn't guided gently through fermentation. It's heavily controlled at every step. Grapes are sourced broadly and inconsistently, which means the raw material often lacks balance on its own. Instead of fixing that in the vineyard, the corrections happen later. That's where additives and adjustments come in. Flavor gaps are filled. Texture is shaped. Rough edges are softened artificially. The wine is built layer by layer to create the illusion of richness and complexity, even when the grapes themselves don't support it. What makes this worse is how well it works. The wine feels bold, smooth, and intense, which convinces people they're drinking something substantial. But that depth isn't natural, it's assembled. Ménage à Trois doesn't just cut corners, it replaces winemaking with construction. Grapes become a base ingredient, not the star. That's why this brand earns the top spot. It's the clearest example of wine being treated as a manufactured product rather than a fermented one. By now, one thing should be obvious. Most commercial wine is heavily manipulated. It's built to sell fast, taste familiar, and scale cheaply, not to reflect grapes or time. Doing it cleaner means tighter sourcing, fewer shortcuts, and more control, which costs more and sells less. That's why this next list is very short. These wines aren't healthy and they aren't perfect, but they avoid many of the worst practices you've just seen. If you want clear label breakdowns without marketing spin, subscribe to this channel. And comment which wine brand on the avoid list surprised you the most. Now, let's start the safer list. Safe number 4. Bonterra Organic Vineyards. Bonterra earns a place on the safer list because it begins at a point where most commercial wines already cut corners. Farming practices. The brand focuses on organic vineyards, which limits the use of synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and chemical soil treatments. That matters because lower chemical pressure in the vineyard reduces the need for heavy correction later in the winemaking process. Another reason Bonterra stands out is its lower level of intervention during production. Compared to many mass-market wines, there is less reliance on aggressive processing techniques to fix flavor issues after fermentation. Instead of forcing wine to match a narrow taste profile, the process allows more of the grape's natural characteristics to remain intact. However, Bonterra is still a large-scale producer. It operates at volume and must maintain consistency across wide distribution. That means it can't avoid every commercial shortcut, and it doesn't operate like a small, hands-on winery. Some standardization is still part of the process. What separates Bonterra is what it avoids, not what it claims. It skips several of the most common industrial practices used to rush production, mask weak grapes, or engineer flavor aggressively. The result is wine that feels less manipulated and more restrained. Bonterra isn't healthy, and it isn't perfect. But within the commercial wine space, it represents a cleaner approach with fewer compromises, which is exactly why it belongs on the safer list. Safe number 3. Avaline Wine. Avaline makes the safer list for one main reason: transparency. In a wine industry where most brands say very little about how their product is made, Avaline does the opposite. It openly talks about what goes into the bottle and what's left out. That openness alone separates it from a large part of the market. Another reason Avaline stands out is its lighter production approach. Compared to many mass-market wines, there's less reliance on heavy processing aids to correct flavor, color, or texture after fermentation. The wine isn't pushed to hit an extreme taste profile. Instead, the goal is to keep things simple and controlled rather than aggressively engineered. Avaline also avoids overcomplicated marketing claims. Instead of using vague words like artisanal or handcrafted, the brand focuses on clear, plain language. This matters because most wine labels rely on imagery and emotion instead of facts. Here, the emphasis is on clarity, not romance. That said, Avaline is still a commercial wine brand. It's produced at scale, it needs consistency, and it operates within the realities of modern distribution. It's not small batch, and it's not intervention-free. What earns Avaline its spot is that it reduces unnecessary mystery. In wine, openness matters more than fancy labels. While it's not perfect or healthy, it avoids many of the hidden practices that define mainstream bottles, making it a cleaner, more straightforward option in a crowded market. Safe number 2. Kendall Jackson. Kendall Jackson earns a place on the safer list because it shows that even a very large, very famous U.S. wine brand can still follow some traditional fundamentals. This is a name almost everyone recognizes, and unlike many mass-market wines, it hasn't fully abandoned structure for speed. One important factor is controlled vineyard sourcing. Kendall Jackson relies heavily on estate and long-term partner vineyards instead of constantly changing bulk grape sources. That control matters because it allows more consistency in grape quality before winemaking even begins, reducing the need for aggressive fixes later. Another difference is its more traditional fermentation approach. The wines are generally allowed to ferment and develop without being pushed into extreme flavor profiles. The goal isn't to chase sweetness or artificial smoothness, but to maintain balance and structure. This helps preserve a more natural wine character compared to heavily engineered blends. That said, this is still a commercial operation. Kendall-Jackson produces at scale, distributes nationally, and must meet demand. Some standardization is unavoidable, and this is still alcohol, not a health product. What places Kendall-Jackson on the safer list is restrained. It avoids many of the worst mass-market shortcuts and stays closer to classic winemaking practices. It's not perfect, but compared to much of the wine aisle, it represents a more grounded and less manipulated option. Safe number 1, cleanest option. La Crema earns the cleanest spot on this list because it puts place before polish. Instead of chasing one universal flavor, the brand focuses on regional grape sourcing. Grapes are tied to specific growing areas, which naturally limits how much the wine can be forced into a single taste profile. When the fruit is better defined from the start, there's less need to fix it later. Another reason La Crema stands out is restraint. The wines aren't pushed to be extra sweet, overly smooth, or aggressively bold. Flavor comes from fermentation and grape quality rather than from heavy-handed adjustments. That doesn't make the wine perfect. It makes it more honest. Compared to most mass-market brands, La Crema also follows a cleaner production path. There's less emphasis on extreme consistency and more tolerance for natural variation. That's important because variation is normal in real wine. When variation is allowed, manipulation drops. That said, this is still a commercial wine brand. It's widely distributed, produced at scale, and it's still alcohol. There are limits to how far any mainstream brand can go. What separates La Crema is how many shortcuts it doesn't take. It avoids many of the practices that dominate mass wine production. That's why, relative to everything else on the shelf, it stands as the cleanest option in this list. Not risk-free, but far less engineered. This video isn't about quitting wine completely. It's about awareness, not restriction. Wine isn't a wellness drink. It's an occasional exposure, and choosing cleaner options simply reduces how many shortcuts you're accepting. The goal is smarter swaps, not overthinking every bottle. If this breakdown helped you see wine differently, subscribe. This channel exists to expose what labels don't explain. Like the video if you learned something new, comment with the brand that surprised you most, and share this with someone who drinks wine regularly. And if you want to keep going, check out the video on your screen about rice brands to avoid. It connects perfectly with what you just learned.